Hi, I'm Perdita Felicien, and you are listening to ATHLÈTES MONDIAUX.
Hi everyone, you're listening to the ATHLèTES MONDIAUX podcast. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. ATHLèTES MONDIAUX is French for athletes of the world. My guest this week is Perdita Felicien, the 2003 world champion in the 100 hurdles and the 2004 world indoor champion in the 60 hurdles. In this episode, Perdita tells us about her world title 20 years ago in Paris, but also about how falling in the Athens Olympic final transformed her as a hurdler, and about her new life as a broadcaster. You're listening to the original interview in English, but the interview is also available dubbed in French if you understand French better than English. Enjoy! Hi Perdita, I am so glad you're here with me today. This one's going to be a bit special because you and I go back a long time. I don't even remember when we met.
Was it Lieven indoor?
Probably. So this one's going to be a bit special. I'm not going to lie. I first remember you winning in Paris in 2003, just like a lot of French people. I was a volunteer in the press tribune back then. I was like 17 or something. And I saw you win. You were not that old either, actually. You were like 22.
22, turning 23 days later. Yeah, in Paris.
What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Paris 2003?
Goodness, so many overwhelming memories. Obviously, the enormity of the moment, like winning. I do a lot of keynote speaking now, and I always describe the Stade de France. There's no stadium in my more than decades of racing that I felt as magical as the Stade. It is loud. It is like this cacophony. It's massive, right? More than 80,000 people, I believe, can sit there. And so for me, the memory is like the magnetic air and the energy and the sound before the starter, before the hurdle final says, "À vos marques." And the announcer says, "Shh." And then this entire massive stadium that was loud and kinetic is suddenly like absolutely silent. And then you hear the bang of the gun. So those are the one of the things I really remember, how frenzied it felt.
So that's a great place for the next Olympics.
Yes, exactly. Ooh, I can't wait. Yes.
So you were not the favorite in Paris. Was that to your advantage?
Absolutely was to my advantage. I think Bridget Foster was the favorite, Gail Devers of the US, Bridget, of course, being Jamaican. And I think that, making the final, my coach and I knew I could make the final. I thought it'd be top 5. Then when I made it to the final, I was like, could I get bronze? Gold was never in my thought process at all. I think my coach maybe knew, but he didn't tell me. He's not one to talk like that and put pressure on you. So I think it helped because I went under the radar and no one expected very much.
And you knew you had to lean.
Oh my gosh, did you see that lean? 3/100ths of a second is all it took for me to win that medal. And Bridget was closing so much. I wasn't going to lean. And I remember talking to my coach about leaning because weeks before, I was at the Pan Am Games in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. And I had lost to Bridget by mere hundredths again. And I remember on the phone with my brother and my mom was like, you have to lean. I remember getting to training camp in Paris and saying to my coach, I think we were in Chartres. Does that sound familiar?
Chartres, yeah.
Chartres, yeah, there you go. And I said, I should lean at the line. My brother says to lean. And he's like, I don't train you to lean. I train you to win. You don't need to. He said not to lean. But I never forgot what they had said to me. So I made sure in that final, even though my coach was not really for me fighting to lean and didn't think it was necessary, I was like, oh no. And I wasn't a leaner. Never had been, but I decided to lead. And that's really what allowed me to hold off Bridget Foster. And if anyone goes back and watches the replay of like the last 10th of a second of that race, the last few steps, you see it came down to that lean. That lean is probably what allowed me, how I executed the race. But Bridget is such a strong closer and a strong sprinter that in those last 10 meters, she could have swallowed me up. But I leaned and that really kind of made sure that I solidified it.
So do you tell young athletes to lean?
Not really. And I think it depends on if that's your style and if that's how you race and you run. I remember like Michelle Perry, who I used to race against for the USA. She had an amazing lean. Even Dawn Harper, Olympic champion in 2008, I believe. She has a great lean. Like they can fold themselves in half. I think it has to come naturally to you. So, but it's not anything that I think my coach would even remember or validate now. He's just like, okay, some conversation we had and that's it. And he probably still doesn't tell people to lean.
Okay. How was it going back to Canada as the world champion?
Amazing. I was everywhere. I woke up and I was suddenly like, famous, like not just sport famous, but like across the country. People knew who I was, and it was. I like attention, so for me it was no big deal. I like attention. I like people knowing my name. In fact, when I was 18 years old, I love Chinese food, buffet, so all you can eat. I remember getting a fortune cookie that says "You are destined to be famous." I still have the fortune cookie to this day. I remember drawing a picture of myself hurdling and sticking on my bedroom with the fortune cookie. And so when this all attention happened in Canada, I was like, oh, maybe the fortune cookie was right. So I loved it. I was on magazines, I was in newspapers. It was amazing.
So you didn't see it as pressure.
No, no, I think I was naive, to be honest. I think I was so inexperienced that I didn't register it as that. I was too young, too green to see it as pressure. Also, I think it depends on your personality as an athlete. There's some athletes who don't like the glare, don't like the attention. They just do their job and it comes with all of that, but that can be a bit of a distraction. For me, it fueled me. It was like, oh yeah, okay, great. I loved it. So I didn't mind it.
The year later, you won the world indoors.
Yep, one World Indoors in Budapest. Yep.
Did you love racing indoors?
I loved it. I broke the championship record, which was nuts to me. Like that I held an IWF at the time, World Athletics Championship title. Like it was that and then the record. So I loved racing indoors. What makes me strong in the 100-meter hurdles is not my start and not my first 3 or 5 series. It's my close. So while athletes are fading, I don't necessarily pick up speed, but I just am able to maintain instead of fading. So indoors, to be able to do that was really a surprise for me, but it showed that I was working on making the front half of my race match my second half and be as strong as possible. So, I mean, that felt a little, not sweeter than Paris, but there was a lot of talk in Paris that I won because Gail Devers, I think she got DQ'd. So there's a lot of talk like, oh, Perdita Felicien only really won. Not a lot of people, because people who know the sport and respect the sport understand the event. It wasn't a fluke. But then me in Budapest was me versus Gail. Gail was actually in that race. She had just won the world title indoors in the 60, like a day or two before. And everyone was just talking like a guarantee she was going to be a double gold medalist at those world championships, the 60 and the 60 hurdles. And I remember using that as fuel, right? So I was like, oh, really? What about me? Like, I'm the world champion. Why are you just guaranteeing this medal? And I use that to my advantage. So I think all that chatter, all that noise, and it's not majority or everybody, but it's enough on the chat groups that you read it. And so when I went into Budapest, I went with that chip on my shoulders in a way. And I think it motivated me even more. And I came out with the win.
See, you like being the underdog.
I'll have it both ways. I think I like being the underdog, but I also like being the person that people expect something from. Do you know what I mean? Like, I like people counting me out for sure. I think I use that, but I also use like, I'm going to live up to this hype. So I think it's both for me. I don't mind.
Okay. And then, well, you know what I'm going to talk about now. Athens. You were the favorite. You won on a winning streak. Hadn't lost a race, right? And then what happened in the final?
Well, in the final, I'm the world champion. I'm the favorite. I had not lost a race leading up to the summer of the Olympics. And I get to the Olympic final. I win the first round. I win my second round race. And then the third round, I fall at the first hurdle and I crash out in very dramatic and unexpected and devastating fashion of the Olympic final as the world champion. Not obviously planned, not even ever a thought in my mind that would happen to me.
Do you know what happened? What made you fall?
Yeah, I think I was powerful. I think I was faster than I'd ever been. And anyone that has hurdled or knows the hurdles knows timing is everything. You have 8 steps to the first hurdle. And if your body is faster than it's ever registered to be, that timing can be a little bit too much. And where do you want your body to be at its best? Not in practice, not in your imagination, not in your dreams, not in your sports psychology meetings. You want it to be the best in the Olympic final. And what I asked my body to give me, it gave me. And it was too much. Had I been able to have that same type of energy and force, even in the practice, I would have probably been prepared for being, so explosive out of the blocks. But I wasn't. And that cost me. But it's the question of, do you go after it or not? Do you go 85% or 95 or 100%? And any hurdler who's ever won anything will tell you have to be 100%. You'll never win if you don't go after it. And I simply went after it that day. And I gambled and it didn't work out, unfortunately.
You said in your book that Athens changed the way you interacted with fear.
Yeah.
In what way?
I used to be how I described. I wasn't afraid to fail. I wasn't afraid to give it everything. I wasn't afraid to even fall ever as a hurdler. After Athens, I was totally rewired in my brain as a hurdler. Imagine being a pilot who's afraid to fly. Imagine being a gymnast who's afraid to, do a flip or be upside down. That would make it extremely, nearly impossible to do your job properly. And I suddenly became a hurdler who was afraid to fall. I was afraid of my event. I was afraid of hitting something. I was afraid of the first hurdle. But what is in front of you every time you're at practice? It's not like I fell at the 10th hurdle, which is so far away, you're not thinking about it when you're in race mode, or even the third or fourth. I fell at the very first one. So that's 2.25 seconds into any practice, any race. And when the starter says, on your marks, what am I looking at? The very first hurdle. And that's triggering. And I think it was very, very difficult for me to put that fear aside, because again, I had fallen so publicly, so famously. The fall was on the cover of every major newspaper in Canada. It was discussed on radio programs and television shows and chat rooms. There was no Twitter and Instagram back then, but there were other mediums and people were discussing my famous fall. So you can't hide from that. I was well known at home. I can't get away from that. So for me, it changed fundamentally who I was as a hurdler, and it made me a shell of who I used to be.
Okay. Falling, you also impeded the girl next to you,
Yes.
Irina Shevchenko of Russia. You didn't realize it?
No, I had no idea. But you have to understand that, right? I've fallen and I'm still in the Olympic Village. So I'm not looking to analyze my fall. I'm not looking for photographs. I'm not looking for it to be a discussion point. I'm actually being cradled and nestled by my team. I'm being protected. It's a bit of a cocoon. So I had no idea that anybody else was impeded until I finally decided, okay, I'm going to go in these chat rooms and on these boards and kind of like take a peek at life outside of this bubble. And that is when I discovered that I had impeded someone. I didn't know. And then when I discovered I had, that's when the devastation of it all. Because it's one thing to be responsible for your dream and your goal, but to cost somebody else's theirs, that was really hurtful to me. And I could only imagine what it meant to her. Because had that been me, oh my God, right? She had no control over it. And suddenly her dream is gone.
So you felt like you had to apologize?
Yeah, that's who I am. That's just who I am. I wanted her to know that I was deeply sorry. I contemplated writing her in the village, but I was licking my wounds also at the same time. And I thought, is that too forward? How would I do it? Who do I contact? I don't speak Russian. So I had all these excuses that were in a way convenient, right? Because I had no idea what to do with my pain, let alone how do I reach out in this manner? And so I decided not to, but I thought I'll wait till time passes, till we leave the village, and I'll find a way to reach out to her. Didn't know how I was going to do it or how I would do it, but I knew I had to. I wanted to know, like, I didn't plan it. And here's the thing I will say about hurdlers, and I think this is an unspoken philosophy or rule. Our lanes are so narrow. They're not even 2 meters apart. We all understand that we are making decisions at speed. We are navigating metal obstacles at speed. We also understand we are mere inches and millimeters away from each other and a barrier. And if one of us goes off course, all of us are at risk. Do we want that? Do we plan it? No, but I think we all know. And I think we all understand that you don't necessarily blame, unless it was obviously intentional or someone did something horrible to you.
Right.
But you don't necessarily blame because you know it is a built-in risk of your actual event, right? Of your sport. So there's a part of me years later that understands that she probably understood that I didn't do that on purpose. But I knew I wanted to apologize and I wanted to see me. And so, yeah, that when I got the opportunity to say something to her, I made sure I took advantage of it. I was able to actually meet up with Irina, and it was months after Athens. And it was actually in France, in Liège, and in the indoor meet. Or was it Madrid? It probably was Madrid indoors. I remember seeing her name on a call list of the meet and being a little shocked and stunned and being like, oh, all the stuff that you've been saying that you want to say sorry to her and you haven't done it yet. Here, now there's no excuse. And I was like, you have to find her and you have to say, I'm sorry. And it can't be a phone call. It can't be a note. Like, you have to look in her eyes and you have to let her know that you're sorry. I saw her in the warm-up before our race. And I sat and I sat and I sat. And finally, so I was like, okay, you have to take this opportunity. I wrestled with, do I do this before the race? Because who wants this energy? The girl that bowled you out of the Olympics, I don't know how she feels about me. I don't know. But I also knew that I don't know if I will see her after the race. I don't know if I'll get the opportunity later. And if I don't take it now, there's no guarantee I'll get it again. And I have to take the risk. I was really prepared for her to be negative. I was prepared for her to maybe tell me off. I don't speak Russian, but body language is a thing. I was ready for all of it, but I desperately hoped she'd give me some grace and she just received what I was saying. But I didn't know, but I was ready for it all. And even if she did have a negative reaction to me, I braced myself for that, and I would have been okay with that. Like I was okay with it not going well, right? Of course, of course. So I remember going up to her, and I described it in My Mother's Daughter in detail, but I kind of go up to her and I either mouth or say, I'm sorry. I hold my hands to my chest and I kind of bow and I say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she didn't have a lot of words for me. She didn't have anything to say. It wasn't, and there's not tons of dialogue, but it was enough to say her body language and her nodding and her, yep, yeah. Like it was I get it. I understand. No need for this. We're fine. It's fine. I'm fine. It's okay. And I thought, Mathilde, that was the most gracious thing that she could have done in that moment. She could have walked away. She could have, is the middle finger universal? I don't know. She could have given me the middle finger. She could have stormed off. She could have done any of those things. She could have not looked my way, ignored me, but she didn't. She stood there, received it, and just said, it's okay. Like, it's fine, right? And when I was standing there too long, I think, for her, I was like, no, I want you to know, like, I'm really, really sorry. Like, I need you to know I'm sorry. That's when she was, she kept nodding and she, a half a smile, something. But it wasn't a scowl. It wasn't a frown. And I'm probably, describing the scene far too long. But for me, it felt enormous because you have to appreciate the guilt, the weight. And I'm dealing with my own stuff too, right? My own depression and anxiety and disappointment and, being called a choke. And so I'm dealing with all that. And then this on top of it. But that was a big gift for me that she was like, we're good. I'm most grateful to her for that because it could have gone very differently. And then I would still have to wrestle with it. I would have accepted it. I would have made peace with that because I would have deserved whatever she had felt. That's very valid. I hurt her. But the fact that she gave me that, so much gratitude for her till this day.
So you got a medal in Osaka. Was it the first time you've been yourself again?
I talked about being a different hurdler, how I interfaced and interacted with fear and the fear of falling and the fear of failure. And I still wrestled with that in Osaka. But what I promised myself I would do every single practice and every single day was I would just try and show up. It didn't matter if I was at 10% power, 10%, or 15%, 20%. I would just show up to every practice. And every day, if I would just show up, maybe that will change a little bit of the balance into my favor. Finally, when we got to Nagai, this is so ironic. This is before they changed the false start rule. But there was a false start in the semifinal. And you have to imagine what I'm dealing with, wrestling with, right? Like that, again, the anxiety and the angst around everything. I'd never won again at that point. And there was a false start and walked back. They said I had the false start in the semifinal. This is to go to the final. I wasn't the false starter, though. I wasn't the one who false started. The tape showed it, and I knew I didn't. But you know how track and field can be and how starters can be. Sometimes you do get a false start, even if it's not your fault or you didn't do it. It was someone else a few rows behind. Didn't matter. You couldn't negotiate with them. So that, again, everything that I had built to be strong in this race did damage again. Because there's this, oh my God. And anyone who's ever been through trauma, anyone who's ever lived through like anything truly devastating, any little thing can be a trigger for you, right? It doesn't have to be on the track. It can be in life. It could be, unfortunately, maybe your dog died, but seeing someone walking their dog or a bark of a dog, like, those things that can undo all the work you've done. And so for me, in that literal live moment, that false start being ascribed to me was devastating. The rule, there was not one and done yet. At that point, it would come, I think, in the next year. But so I had another shot. They reset the whole field again. But again, if I false start or if it's even given to me, I'm out of the race. Another headline, another disappointing moment, another just like poor Perdita, right? And I remember when the gun went off that second time to get to the final, I sat in the blocks. Because what else was I going to do? Have a great start? What if I false started? What if I fell? Whatever. And I sat in the blocks. And when the gun goes off, I am so far back. This never happens. I'm not a great starter, but I see a step. I see everyone in front of me. I see everyone like they've taken a step on me. But what I am so proud, because I am a strong closer, and that's always been my bread and butter, I am able to walk down nearly half the field, like more than the field. And I either get second or first in that semifinal. And I think I ran 12.6 or something with sitting back in the blocks. I remember my training partner at the time was Brashawn Jackson, an American 400 meter hurdler. And I remember the best feeling was when Brashawn was like, Purdy, like, what did, like, he and my coach were so amazed about what I was able to do. Not the false start and all that, whatever. They realized it was not fair. And I had walked down the field to get into second position. So when you ask me about Nagai Stadium in Osaka, there was something really magical to me about that experience, because the semifinal had undid me, but I figured it out again. I said, if they're saying that I ran 12.6 sitting in the blocks, I have no choice. But in the final, even if I fall and crash and burn again, but to be everything that I can be. I cannot let this hold me back anymore. And I made a decision in that final. It was my birthday too. And I think that helped. It was my 27th birthday. Fuck all this shit. I'm going to, for one night, run a race that I don't have the shadow of Athens cast over me tonight. And I did. And the gun went off and I gave it everything. And that was the fastest race in history as far as placing, meaning every single place from first to eighth would have won a medal. Eighth place literally would have won a medal in every single edition of the every past world championships. Oh. So I think eighth place or ninth place was like 12.6. 12.6 traditionally will win you a medal at the world championships. It didn't. You were able to get eighth or ninth there. And I think Michelle Perry won 12.40, maybe 43. I maybe ran 40. I think she ran 46. I ran 49. But again, 300ths of a second. And I was second. And honestly, that medal, I mean, where the heck is that medal? We can't see it now, but we're audio, but it's very close to me. It felt so sweet. Until this day when people are like, what is better, the Paris medal or, you know, I'm like, they're different. They mean different things. But that one in Japan for me was massive. It was a relief. I felt like my old self. And I always tell people, you can be afraid to fail. You might be afraid to fall, but you have to be okay with that, because that's a possibility if you're human. But then you also have to find the strength to put that aside in the moments where you need to put it aside and still take a chance on yourself. Still go after your goal, go after your dream, whatever it is. Start a new venture, start afresh, whatever that looks like for you. It might not look like what other people want it to look like or be perfect, but for you, you have to do it. And for me, it was the night where I'm like, I put everything aside and I showed myself this is what can happen if you're able to work through all that gunk and all that crap.
Wow. Yeah. Athens were not your first Olympics, right? You were in Sydney?
Oh, yeah. Sydney, I was so young. Oh my God, I was the youngest on the Canadian team, 19, turning 20 in. Because I'm an August baby, my birthday's in August, I'm always at a championship for my birthday. For how many years? Like 20, almost 20, 17 years. I'm always at a championship. That was my first one in Sydney. And that's when I'm like, oh, I want to do this. I want to do this thing. It was amazing to see.
Because you qualified even without meaning to qualify, right? You didn't even know.
Yeah, I didn't even know that there was an Olympics that year. I was a freshman at the University of Illinois, and I was the youngest to make the final at the NCAA championships in June, and the Olympics were September in Sydney, Australia. And when we're flying home after the NCAA championships, I was sixth in the final. My coach was like, you made the standard. You made the Canadian standard for the Olympic team. And I was like, oh, okay, like there's an Olympics. Okay, cool. And so I didn't even know, but I never set out to be like this great star in track or this great hurdler. I simply was good. And I didn't know how good I was at the time, but thank God my coach did. And even when I was getting ready that summer to go to the Olympics, it felt like too much. Like I just wanted to stay home that summer and be with my friends and be with my family. It felt really inconvenient to be training for an Olympics. Imagine that. But that's really where my mind was at. I didn't know how good I was. I didn't know that I could be or was at that point really, emerging world-class athlete.
But then Edmonton a year later was a big turning point.
Edmonton was a huge turning point for me. Canada hosted the World Championships. First time they'd ever been in North America. It was a home championship, so more attention, like how the athletes will feel next year in Paris for the Olympics. Like at a home games of any caliber, you being the host nation and a national athlete, there's a lot more on you. And I remember I wanted to really make the final. But what happened is I collided. I'd only been hurling about a year, like on that level, college level. And there was an American athlete named Anjanette Kirkland. And she was in the lane beside me in my semi. And I had really unruly technique at that point. So my cradle arm or my swing arm, my lead arm would kind of go a little bit wide. And so if me and her athlete are like stride for stride, we'd make contact.
Okay.
Incidental contact. So not on purpose. It wouldn't really ever get me in trouble in college because I would always be leading, usually. But in this race with Anjanette, I made contact with her. And I think it kind of either stunned her or annoyed her. But at the next hurdle, and I'm still very salty about this, but in the next hurdle, she decides to she swats me. Okay. So she gets revenge. I should actually slow this down and show somebody. I should post this on Instagram because I have the video of it. But she swats me. And I'm a good hurdler, but I'm not a super strong hurdler to be able to withstand that. So she swats me so hard when she goes over the hurdle next that I lose my balance and that stops all my forward momentum. And there's maybe 1 or 2 hurdles left. This is hurdle 6 or 7. And I lose all momentum, and I missed a spot by 1 place. Vonette Dixon of Jamaica took the last spot, and it was by 8 or 9 hundredths of a second. And I am pissed off. I am salty. I am upset. I was upset because I'm I didn't even hit you hard, and I didn't even hit you on purpose. Who has time in a race to think about coming back and swatting, right? I'm also 20, young, just up and coming. So I'm who the heck? Anjanette goes on the next day, and I think she wins the whole thing. I believe she becomes the world champion the next day. But I watched her win, and I was But that was the fire I needed because I was okay, I didn't like how this went down. I don't like that this happened. Okay, I have to take my responsibility for it. But I'm I'm going to do everything for the next 2 years until the next World Championships. And the next World Championships happened to be in Paris in 2003, mm-hmm. And we just discussed how that went. Thank you, Anjanette Kirkland. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Your book is as much about your mom as it is about you.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to tell me about how instrumental she was in your career. Did she help you believe in yourself? Did she help you believe you can make it?
Yeah. When I wrote My Mother's Daughter, it really was a memoir to uncover my mother's story, her immigration story. And I always tell people I believe everyone's a hurdler. And the reason I believe everyone's a hurdler is because the best hurdler I know is my mom. And the figurative life hurdles that she's had to overcome in her life are why I believe that. And my mother really is, she's my biggest champion for sure. But there was a time when I was a teenager, when I was really good at track, that I just totally quit. I quit when I was about 14 to 16. And I quit because I'm man, I don't want this. And I had lost a really big race when I was 13. And I didn't like the way losing felt. So I was I'm done with all this crap. And so I went to high school and I didn't do track at all for 2 years. And I didn't do any sports. And my mother is really the one who, she says encouraged, but the word is really nagged. She nagged me for 2 years very consistently to go back to track. And it was so annoying. Really, imagine being a teenager and your mom knows everything and telling you all this stuff. You're not really likely to listen. You think you know everything as a teen. But because it had been 2 years of her constantly bothering me about this, I figured, okay, let me go back and do it. So my mom is really the one who restarted me back on my path to track and field. I can say this without a doubt, 100%. Had she not been in my corner, had she not really been on me, I wouldn't have taken the sword back up. It wouldn't have been necessary for me. I was great academically. I would have found my way there. I wasn't great at basketball or volleyball. I was just really good athletically, but I wouldn't have been a star in any of those other sports. So track really was my ticket. Had it not been for her, I wouldn't have done it. So when I think of all the things that I've done and that I've accomplished, they really are because my mother has been in my corner. And again, in Athens, when I fell, they got her on the phone. And you've read the book, I know you remember this line, but she gets on the phone and I'm like a mess. I am, you can imagine this is like moments after I had crashed in the final. And my mom gets on the phone and she's like, you are the gold. Wipe your tears, my child. You are the gold. And my mom is not a poet. She's not a writer, but she just described what I meant to her and the family in that moment, that I wasn't a medal. I wasn't a title. I wasn't a title or a record. I was gold to them. I was their child. I was their everything. And that's who my mother is. And, I have a 3-year-old daughter now, and I think about the kind of parent I want to be to her. And if she does happen to do sports, how am I going to influence her? How am I going to raise her? What am I going to be for her? And I really just want to be what my mom is, just a strong presence that she knows is there and that loves her no matter what the results are and is invested in whatever it is that she wants to do. So I am grateful to my mom to this day, because everything that I have, like I'm in this office full of like awards and medals and trophies and shoes and spikes with my name on them. And it all feels really great. And I'm like, I've had this wonderful, unique experience, from a woman who came to Canada, immigrated here. We lived in a women's crisis shelter. We were homeless. We didn't have anything, to turning it into the life that we all have now, because that she was willing to really, sacrifice very much for us.
As a daughter and as a mom, what do you think is the best way to help a kid when they want to become a professional athlete? Because not all of them are going to make it.
No. And I get that question so much from parents. Like maybe their parents, their kids do hockey or figure skating and they're just starting out. And I think, every parent knows your child. So there's no one blanket approach that you can take with your child. And I think knowing who they are intimately is very important, because that will dictate how you approach it. So some of the things parents ask is like, they're not as, committed to practicing. They don't really, do the stuff outside of practice that I want to do, or I also have to tell them to go to practice. And if you have a child who you think is just maybe a little bit lazy or a little bit distracted, you got to be hard on them. But then if you have a child where, like they're maybe more sensitive or whatever else it is, that hard hammer on them will actually make them, repel and repel, then you don't need to take that approach. But I think you have to get to know your child. You have to be invested in who they are as individuals outside of sport. And you have to be whatever it is that they need you to be, whether it's that hard hand or that empathetic ear. And sometimes I'll say this, the main thing is you can't always want to talk to them about winning or losing or dissecting their results. It can't be about that. You also, and this is something I'm learning to do with my child, is you have to normalize failure. And sometimes when we're at the dinner table with our kids, sometimes when we are interacting with them, we only want to hear about their wins, what great grade they got or what mark they have. I want to sit at a dinner table with my Nova and talk about what went wrong with this week. She's only 3, we can't do that yet, but what did you fail at? So then when she gets to a big moment or a big, test or whatever that maybe doesn't go her way, we've already disarmed the stigma around failing or falling short, because we all know as humans, that is just part of our experience. That is just part of our journey. You'll start something and do something and it doesn't go exactly the way you felt. Don't throw away the failure. Don't throw away any of that. Take the lesson out of it.
Right.
Maybe I need to pivot and do something else. Maybe this wasn't the right approach. Maybe I learned I can do something on my own and I don't care what anybody else thinks about it. So I think there's so much more lessons that we get from our failures, but we're so quick to avoid them, or we're so quick to push them aside and move on to the next. But to me, any parent, I would say, normalize failing, normalize falling short, and take the negativity and the venom out of the world's failure.
That's also a cultural thing, I think. In North America, it seems a bit more normal to fail. In Europe, there's still a big stigma around it. Like if you fail, it means that's not your thing. You should try to do something else.
Interesting. Yeah. So people are less risk adverse, you think, or less likely to
probably. Yeah. Like if you have your own company and it goes bankrupt, people will think, well, this person can be trusted for a new company because they failed once. But in North America, it's more like, well, they have experience. They failed once, so they learn from their mistakes. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So
Interesting, eh? Difference.
yeah.
Yeah.
And having had these highs and lows, does it help you being a broadcaster now? Because you understand.
Yeah. I think that's been my biggest strength as a broadcaster. I'm in these mixed zones at the Olympics and World Cups and World Championships and all these major events. And I've been at both sides. I've been at supreme triumph and, happiness. And I've been at extreme disappointment, devastation, just completely feeling blindsided by your body and an event that's occurred. And I can exist in the in-between as well, because I've had the in-betweens, right? So as a broadcaster, it informs, if someone's had a really harsh moment, it informs how I talk to them. What's the first question I'm asking? What am I leading with? Because I understand, for me, when I'm in the mix zone and crap has hit the fan, it's been horrible. A harsh question or a gotcha question, like what happened, might be necessary, but for it to be the very first one that you hit me with is not going to work for me. But if I can praise you first, or if I can give you something and say, you know what, I've been on the receiving end of a day like today. I understand what you're feeling. Are you able to put that into words? I'm not asking them to analyze what happened or what went wrong, or you know what I mean? I'm making it colorful to disarm them in a way. And then do I get to the technical? Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what happened? Can you make sense of anything right now in this moment? Maybe they can, maybe they can't. But what I will say is this. Because I have fallen at the Olympics and I didn't even get an opportunity to even I didn't get to win it, I didn't get to lose it, I didn't even get to see. So I can't even say I was 5th, I was 8th. Do I say I was a finalist? I don't know. It's so murky. I didn't cross the finish line. Do you know what I mean? It's not like I leaned and got out dipped. I don't know. And that's really hard for me at times because I don't know. And I wonder if it would have been easier to be 8th, literally be 8th, be 3rd or 5th. Do you know what I mean? Because then I would have gotten my answer. I don't know. And I was in the shape of my life. I went into that final with a personal best, I think, of 12.4, 4.6 or 4 something. And all my training was 12.3. I was 12.33 to 12.36. That was the shape we were in. So it was at least a 1300s faster. But I never got to show it. So what happens in these scenarios, right, is oftentimes I am met by someone who has just won. I am met by someone who has had at the Olympics, at the World Championships, the moment. Imagine, and this is not me, thank God. Imagine not having peace with my experience and then having to interact with someone who just had the best day of their life. If I was not at peace, if I was salty, if I was still broken and I had not closed that chapter properly in a healing manner, the type of broadcaster I would be would potentially be bitter,
right,
jealous, because I'm constantly contending with someone who's yes! Having known I've never, in the Olympic setting at least, felt that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't wrestle with it at all. And I'm so grateful because I've done the work. But some days I wonder, I'm wow, Perdita, imagine if you did not put that aside. Not even aside, sorry. Make something out of it. Just decide it's my pain. I'm going to always talk about it. I'm not going to shy away from it. And it's something that happened. I'm going to use it as a lesson. I would be in these situations very uncomfortable, very jealous even. And it would be the wrong job for me. That is the truth. But I find because I've made peace with it, and I know both extremes, and there's at least 3 examples I can tell you in a mixed zone. And I won't tell you the athletes' names, but I'll just tell you one of the scenarios. It was the World Championships. It must have been 2017. But there was an athlete who was the favorite to win. Favorite. Had not lost all season. And ended up getting 3rd. Which for this athlete, for a lot of us, it'd be 3rd, that's good. But for this athlete, no, you were not supposed to lose in this manner. And again, the whole press is what happened? What did you do? And I remember they were not ready to talk. And I was in the 3rd row of the tribune. And they actually came to me. And before going on camera or on the microphone or doing anything, they were like, how did you do this? How? Because they now had to talk about this moment. In that moment, I said to my camera guy, my producer, I'm not recording this. I'm not compromising this trust here. I don't care if this gets me fired. I'm just not doing this. So turn off the mic and I'm going to have this moment. I'm going to talk to them. And thank God, to their credit, they're like, yep, we got you. And we not sat, but, I'm leaning over the tribune and they're there, tired and just talking and emotional. And we just talked it out. And we just talked it out maybe 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes. You can't stay there forever. But I don't remember what I said. I don't remember what I said, but I think I remember saying, what you feel now is valid and you're going to feel it for a while. I said, just speak your truth. Just speak about what you're feeling right now. And your vulnerability in this moment is your strength. And that's what people will connect with. And I think I said, because I still believe this to this day, there's someone watching at home who will be able to relate to you losing in this manner more than if you had won the gold, which obviously we know you wanted. Talk to that person. Be there for that person. And it just needs to be one. It doesn't need to be the whole world. It doesn't need to be the whole track and field community. It just needs to be that one person, and just talk to them. And I remember and we did the camera, we got back on and we did the interview on camera. And I remember after she left, I felt proud. I felt proud, one, that they knew, and this athlete is like a generation behind me, like maybe like 5, 6 years, 7 years, maybe younger than me. And I thought, wow, that they knew or remembered what happened to me to come and ask me, and that they felt safe with me. I felt proud of that. And like, that's why that moment meant something in Athens. Like, I can still use it to help other people, right?
Definitely. And why did you want to become a broadcaster? Was it to still feel the adrenaline? Because it must be hard to retire, right?
No, it wasn't hard for me to retire. I was so ready to retire. Again, everything I do is by design. So I didn't retire before I knew I was ready. My last race was 2012, but I didn't announce my retirement for another 13 months because I was just trying to think. And then I flew back to Australia in 2013 to decide, after 13 years of my first Olympics, is this a decision that I want to make? And it was. And I think I wanted to be a broadcaster because in 2008, I was injured going into Beijing, and the national broadcaster here, CBC, asked me to go. And I was still racing at the time. And I loved it. I loved the adrenaline. I loved the attention. I loved the glare. All the stuff that I love on the track, I found on camera. And so I didn't tell anyone. And so for 5 years, I held on to that idea of like, oh, I'm going to be a broadcaster. So I already knew what I wanted to do. So it made it easier to transition because I knew what was next. And then this gives me some of the hits of adrenaline. It gives me front row seat to sport, right? And, for the first time I hosted my own show, I hosted a series, or hosted during the Olympics for 2020, which is in 21, with a co-host, Andrew Chang. And then I had my own show again with Andrew during the Winter Olympics, Beijing 2022. So I've kind of really gone through the ranks, and it's like, it doesn't matter if it's a winter event or Winter Olympics or whatever, like, I have experiences that most people don't have, and I can speak to them. I kind of realize this is where I need to be. I have a lot to say, obviously, but this is really where I want to be.
Did you ever consider coaching?
People ask me that all the time. No. It doesn't give me joy. It's not my thing. It's really hard, I'll be honest, in Canada to make a living as a full-time coach. And I knew the kind of coach I would be. I wouldn't be good to an athlete. Meaning I am hard. I am super masculine energy. I am, like, if you're not doing it properly, it's going to frustrate me. And I thought, an athlete doesn't need that. They don't need that. They need someone who's patient and unconditionally supportive, not frustrated by their attitude or inability to be coachable or get something. It's just not my lane. So no, but mentoring and being an advisor and, being there to influence, athletes who reach out to me, that part I love all the time, like being a consultant of sorts.
Okay. I'm doing this podcast to step out of my comfort zone.
And congratulations to you for doing this podcast and going out of your comfort zone.
Thank you.
This is massive.
Well, I don't really feel out of my comfort zone talking to you because we've known each other for quite a long time.
Yes. And one thing I want to say, which people probably don't know, when I was writing my book, My Mother's Daughter, there was the scenes in Paris that I really needed help with the French translation. And you are such a brilliant translator, and you're just such a good and kind friend. I remember reaching out to you to help, and you did not hesitate. You're like, here's how you say it. Here's the lines. Here you go. And like, you wasted no time. And I'm still like so grateful to you for like making the time, giving me your attention and your expertise. You didn't ask for anything in return. And I'm just so grateful that you did that for me. And I hope you saw your name in the back because I wanted to make sure that that was there. Yes. Thank you for that.
No worries at all. When preparing for this interview, I read a few things that surprised me. So I have a few is it true questions. Is it true you used to hate hurdles?
Yes. Yep. I hated them because I felt like This is when I was probably 13, 14. I was already doing volleyball, basketball, long jump, like other sports. And so my friends wanted me to do the hurdles, and I didn't want to do it. One, I'm like, it looks dumb. Like, who wants to run and jump something? You could get hurt. Little did I know. And so I was not interested. And then I kept doing it after a while, and I didn't want to, but my coaches would only train me as a hurdler in high school. They did not give me a choice because I wanted to quit. And they're like, no, you're a hurdler. So every practice I went to, Coach ATHLÈTES would only coach me as a hurdler. So I had no choice, really.
Okay. Is it true you once missed a race because you slept through it?
I did. I was in Germany. What was the name of the town? But I slept. Yeah. And I woke up thinking, okay, let me go. And I'm looking around. They're like, P, the race is done. Like all the other hurdlers, like, the race is done. What the hell? Yeah, true story.
Is it true you never read your own press?
After a point. After some point of Athens, I stopped. Because Athens, remember I told you I love the attention, I love the glare, but I was also used to the glare and the attention being positive. After Athens, it wasn't. And after that, I was like, this is too devastating. So after a while, I stopped. I would say to any athlete or anyone doing something, and press doesn't have to be literally the newspaper. It could be the criticisms, the opinions of others. Never have the opinions of other people, even if you love them and they love you to pieces, overweigh your opinion and your goal and your desire. It's good to have other people weighing in, but if it overwhelms what you think of yourself, you won't move forward in what you want to do. So for me, I don't read my press, and I don't put too much weight or stock in other people's opinions of what it is I want to do.
Mm-hmm. Is it true you're writing a new book?
I am writing a new book. So I have 2 book ideas, but the one I'm writing about now is a lot of the things that we've touched on. So it's more of like a toolkit, a life guide. Again, nonfiction, so stories and experiences from my life on the track, off the track, as a presenter now, and taking some of those lessons and putting them in a book form that hopefully can inspire and encourage and motivate other women. And then the other one is more like a thriller, but that's like maybe a few years down the road. It's like mapped out, but I'm like, when I'm done nonfiction writing, I'm going to be a fiction writer. But the first things first, I should say.
How important is it to love the process and not just focus on the goal?
You have to, because here's the thing. I know not more than anyone. I know especially that you might not reach that goal. But if you can enjoy the process and learn from the process, regardless of if you get to the end or not, which hopefully we all do, you have those lessons and those building blocks that you can use for your next adventure, your next project, your next whatever it is. But you don't necessarily have to love all aspects of the process, but you have to appreciate it. And if you're just quick to get to the end, you might not get there. And then you're left with what? Supreme disappointment. But if you learn to value the process, then regardless of if you get to the end or not, you can totally relish what you've accomplished and what you've gained, because then it's never a waste of your time.
Mm-hmm. My final question to you is the question I asked all of my guests. The podcast is called ATHLÈTES, MONDIAUX, and you speak French, so you know it means athletes of the world. Because what I love the most about track and field is that it is a universal sport. Anybody can do track and field. What is the one thing you love the most about track and field?
That of all the questions you asked me today feels like the hardest. Feels like the hardest. And nobody, I don't think in my years of being in sport or in the public eye, has ever asked me what I love about the sport. And there's so much I love. And I'm not pausing because I don't know. I'm pausing because there's so much. And how do I streamline my answer for you? I love about this sport, what you just said, is that it is so universal, that there aren't a lot of barriers to entry. So when I think of, the sport that people love in Canada, it's hockey, but it's extremely expensive and it's not accessible to everyone. You need to have ice. You need to, or an access to an ice rink. You need to have all the gear. Hundreds and thousands of dollars is the cost. When I think about track and field, you need your desire and your abilities, and you may or may not even need shoes, right? And this is the truth for me. My mother didn't have a lot of money to invest in sport. My mother didn't even know what track and field was when I ran home in grade 4 to tell her I made the team and that she had to sign the permission slip. She had no idea what I was talking about. The fact that this sport allowed a woman like me, a young girl like me, whose mother was a single parent, we didn't have a lot of resources or money. Simply what I had was my desire and my ability and my mother's love and courage and all the things that she gave us. And that was enough for me to go on to succeed and to see the world and to dream big. I don't know that another sport would have given me that. I don't know. This was a sport where in high school, my mom couldn't afford to send me to all the meets, and the coaches or the club would pay my dues. They'd be like, okay, we'll take care of you. But for me, how beautiful is this sport that you just simply have to show up and say, this is what I want to do. And I think that's the beauty of the sport. And that's why I love it so much, because it gives so much to people, regardless of where you live and who you are and what you look like and where you come from.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Anything you want to leave us with?
No, but thank you for this. It felt like a chat over coffee with a friend. I love this.
Yeah, thank you. And that's it for today. Perdita, if you're listening, merci beaucoup. To all of you listening, I hope you liked the episode. If you did, please share it on social media to help the podcast grow. And make sure to subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I'll be back soon with another episode. Bye-bye.